So this morning I want to talk about making amends, and this is folks that have familiarity with recovery, community, 12-step. This will be a familiar concept, although we might take a little slightly different angle with it. But in this intricate web of our human relationships, conflicts and misunderstandings are inevitable. And making amends at its most basic level acknowledges the harm we've caused and helps us to understand its impact on the other person. And this is not about self-criticism of our harmful behavior, but rather a compassionate recognition of our actions. When harm is done, and this could be intentional or unintentional, it could be accidental, the natural inclination is to seek forgiveness. However, the true essence, I would suggest, of making amends lies not in anticipation of forgiveness. Rather, the essence of it is in the intrinsic value of it is in taking responsibility and striving to right a wrong. Because doing that, though it's challenging for us, leads to a profound personal growth and more authentic connections with others. As some of you know, and I said this a minute ago, making amends is an important part of 12-step programs. I believe it's step 9, and I looked it up. Make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And at its core, making amends is an acknowledgement of one's mistakes and an active effort to rectify them. It requires a deep sense of humility and the courage to confront our own shortcomings, both of which can be tough because it goes against the ego's wish to be right and to see ourselves in a positive light. Okay, that's where we get hung up typically. The ego rears up and says, "Nah, don't want to go there." Because the act of making amends is in itself, though, an expression of integrity and ethical responsibility, independent of the response that it elicits from the aggrieved party. Let me repeat that, independent of the response it elicits from the aggrieved party, meaning forgiveness. Because by focusing on the process of making amends rather than the outcome, it helps us cultivate greater self-respect and perhaps greater inner peace. Knowing with humility that we have taken genuine steps to address our missteps, that's where we gain the self-respect. That's where we gain the integrity. Because expecting forgiveness or going into this process by expecting forgiveness is usually about appeasing the ego, which just complicates the process of making amends. It sort of takes over, it hijacks the process. My intention is more about appeasing my ego than it is about genuinely making an amends to you. And this places an undue burden on the injured party to absolve us, and that creates a power imbalance because all of a sudden now I'm waiting for you to sort of let me off the hook. It makes the act of making amends transactional rather than freely offered. And this then can lead to disappointment and resentment if forgiveness is not forthcoming. Because again, what I'm doing it for is to get the forgiveness. I'm not genuinely um, asking for your, I'm addressing the harm that I've caused. And we end up then holding the other person hostage to our need for forgiveness, to the ego's need for forgiveness. And I would suggest to you that that undermines the sincerity of the act of making amends. So what if we let go of this need for forgiveness? So that the goal is not to obtain forgiveness, but to alleviate the suffering that we've caused the other person. Because what that does, it shifts the focus from seeking that external validation from the other person to nurturing our moral compass. This is where the tools of our practice are invaluable. A key tenet of our path of Buddhism is non-attachment, the practice of releasing desires and expectations that lead to suffering. And in the context of making amends, This means letting go of the desire or the need or the wish for forgiveness, letting go of the ego's need to be forgiven. Because if we don't cling to the outcome, then we can focus more on our intentions and our actions. Non attachment to the outcome, to the need for forgiveness, allows us to act from a place of genuine remorse and ethical responsibility so that it's no longer about seeking personal vindication. Because the act of making amends without expectation of forgiveness, it encourages us to tap into a deeper understanding of empathy and compassion. It requires us to put ourselves in the shoes of those we have wronged to truly grasp the impact of our actions. As I said, when we're seeking forgiveness, that tends to hijack the whole process. So by setting that need aside, we get the ego's needs out of the way as best we can. And this is, I think, a true act of humility because it doesn't bring with it an expectation for forgiveness. Our challenge then is making amends with sincerity and clarity, free from the distractions of ego and expectation. This empathic approach not only aids in the healing process for the person we've harmed, but fosters our own personal growth. It helps us cultivate greater humility. It allows us, because we get the ego and the outcome out of the way, it allows us to develop a greater awareness of our own behavior, its impact on others, the consequences of it. And this paves the way for more mindful interactions in the future. We learn from our mistakes. We set an intention to try not to repeat them. And what making amends without expecting forgiveness also strengthens the fabric of our relationships. It's a much cleaner interaction because it demonstrates a commitment to honesty and accountability, qualities that are foundational to trust and mutual respect. Sorry, my dog's dreaming over there, if you can hear her. When we take responsibility for our actions without seeking absolution, we signal a willingness to engage in difficult but necessary conversations to keep relationships solidly grounded. Conversations that lead to deeper, more resilient connections. So making amends to those we have harmed, even if we've done so inadvertently, and without an expectation of forgiveness, is a true act of generosity. It is a wonderful gift to give someone. And I would suggest to you that it will be heard and received that way. This act of making amends without expectations is a powerful testament to our capacity for change and redemption. By approaching it without the expectation of forgiveness, we release ourselves from the shackles and attachment to external validation. We embrace a more authentic path of relational integrity. Because in doing this, not only honors the dignity of those affected by our actions, it cultivates, as I said a moment ago, a more compassionate and worldview, a more empathic worldview, one where accountability and healing are prioritized over absolution. So that's my take this morning on amends.